Okay, so the scenario here is that one of the property listing platforms, the somewhat dodgy one, has been running a campaign using scare tactics to dissuade homeowners from DIYing their home rentals and sales and pushing them to use middle people. So we're dealing with the service section for customer type homeowner on the platform. All's fair in business, so no biggie. But the premise of the platform for the customer type homeowner is DIY. There's no provision for a human facilitator. The platform is the facilitator, so this is a problem. Furthermore, traditional home rentals and sales are still mainly done via middle people, regardless of how people feel about them. Homeowners generally feel they have no choice and often see them as an easier way of doing things. The platform clearly has a problem because the key psychographics of the target customer are being tampered with. And if this tampering is successful, there's no customer. So essentially, the platform has a tough job of convincing homeowners that DIY is the way to go, and the incumbents have the easier job of reinforcing the already existing idea that the homeowner has no choice but to use agents. So now, according to our decision model, we have to gather as much information about the situation as possible. This campaign wasn't just thought of on the spot. There is clearly some contextual information outside of just normal competition between platforms that underpins this strategy on the part of the other platform. So there's confidence in this campaign because the old way of doing things, where homeowners would be at the mercy of the middle people, is riddled with unwritten rules between all parties involved in the property rentals, sales, and management value chain. Homeowner schemes tend to get drunk on power and suddenly want to dictate who should live where and how these people should live. What they lack in legal and legislative power, they make up for in unwritten agreements with the middle people who actually facilitate rentals and sales and also perform homeowner scheme management. Until, of course, these parties are pushed to a position where self preservation is the only option on the table and a sale or rental has to happen soon or there's no commission to pay the bills. Internally, you strategically target the homeowner as your primary customer, mainly because they own the item being traded, the property, and ultimately have the real power to actually make decisions in this context. So, although homeowners perceive the process of DIYing property rentals and sales a bit tedious, there's always a homeowner out there who has a horror story about the use of middle people in these transactions. And these horror stories are not few. In fact, good property middle people stories tend to be the exception, and the horror stories of varying degrees the norm. Situations include dodgy tenants hiding behind the agent in terms of vetting, where the agent paints a rosy picture of the tenant's prospective profile, only for them to take their commission and run, and you're left with a nightmare tenant. There are stories of an emerging trend of agents putting prostitution and other criminal syndicates in homeowners' properties, a very lucrative double dipping position for the agent. The agent makes the homeowner believe that the tenant is on the up and up and refuses to share any key documents about this dodgy tenant, using protection of information legislation to try and conceal their motives. There are many other situations, some involving agents forcing homeowners to reduce the sale price because the prospective buyers they are able to attract don't meet the financial requirements to afford the property, not because the property is overpriced. Anything to get their hands on that commission as soon as possible. What's and all aside, these agents have established relationships, or at least processes, along the rentals or sales value chain. That's their competitive advantage. Okay, so let's review where we are in terms of our game setup. So the game is competition between your platform and two player types, estate agents and property listing platforms. Now let's figure out the context. So a bad economy and very high lending rates are triggering defaults on mortgages, which has then led to forced selling on the part of homeowners. A bad economy means salaries are not keeping up with the high cost of living, putting many homeowners in dire straits. A lot of these homeowners have not held their properties long enough to really build up enough equity to walk away with a sizable amount after settling the mortgage and other home ownership costs. So it would be a big plus if they can save as much as possible from selling costs, and the agent's fees tend to be a big chunk of that. Furthermore, a bad economy typically means the risk of tenant default is high and the pool of good tenants is very, very small. A homeowner wouldn't want to get stuck with a tenant who has an affordability issue if they can assess their financial information themselves in fear of being stuck with a bad tenant living in their asset. What happens at times is that the agent, in an effort to find a tenant quickly to get to their commission, might embellish the prospective tenant's financial position or profile, using words such as approved, to convince the homeowner to take the initial money and hand over the keys. Both these contextual conditions drive the homeowner to seek alternatives, and often the alternative is to do it themselves. So, in terms of strategic considerations, there's leverage on both sides, both triggered by the behaviors of one party, leading to three key issues that need to be addressed as part of the strategy for all players. With this in mind, as the DIY platform owner, you have to consider your objectives in terms of what you want to get out of this game. You'd ideally like for your customer acquisition to increase because if more homeowners are looking for alternatives and DIY is their only option, that increases your addressable market. In order to achieve these outcomes and payoff, your strategic positions have to consider the following key strategic issues. Firstly, financial considerations. And if saving every penny in the sales process is a key consideration for selling homeowners, then you might want to consider either reducing prices for your services or increasing your value proposition to include other services in the home selling value chain, such as deeds registration, which itself is not a small cost in as far as conveyancing attorney fees are concerned. Which then leads us to our next consideration, value chain partnerships. You might want to onboard conveyancing attorneys on your platform, get them to partner with you and reduce their conveyancing fees in exchange for a guaranteed minimum number of referrals a year. Perhaps target those conveyancing attorneys that do not form part of the incumbent agents driven in circle. Trust issues is the last consideration we have to make. When dealing with human beings, especially middlemen, and some might even argue salespeople, there are a lot of things one does not get exposure to. There might be a lot of conversations happening without your knowledge, some of them necessary for the fulfillment of what you require as a client or customer, and some just to spice up the process, possibly not in your best interests, definitely to the benefit of the facilitator. It would be beneficial from a customer trust perspective with the help of technology to make the process as transparent as possible. Expose the identity of every potential buyer or tenant, whether their profile fits the desired image of what is considered to be palatable for the body corporate or homeowner association or scheme under which the property for sale or rental belongs. It is up to the homeowner to decide whether to sell or rent to the potential tenant or buyer or not. The same goes for transparency in terms of the profile of the tenant or buyer, financial and otherwise. It's up to the homeowner if they want to take the risk on a tenant based on all information visible to them. The homeowner doesn't have to take someone's word that the potential tenant is supposedly vetted and approved. Without the actual information relating to the potential tenant's profile, such as bank statements and full identity documents. The homeowner should be able to assess all of this information in order to verify the platform's vetting outcome if they wish to, a process they should be privy to as well in terms of its inner workings. There's no way of telling if an agent has taken money in exchange for misrepresenting the real identity of the tenant, only to leave the homeowner with a dodgy individual conducting questionable activities on the homeowner's property.